failure for me really never happened in any sport, academically, nothing. Now, with the thing that's most important in your life that you push, you're failing. And I found myself questioning, do I really want to keep doing this? Is it worth it? All those thoughts that go through your head when you're struggling, as everybody does.
Welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark, and this is episode 16 with Matt Mieske. Pressure. Matt is a former outfielder in the major leagues and started in the Midwest, playing in the Mid-America Conference at Western Michigan University, which is not a hub for the major leagues. But listen as Matt shares his life of failures and pressures and how changing his perspective and point of view and learning to lean into the things that he can control and let go of that which is uncontrollable. His quote, control the things that you can control and the others, don't worry about it. You will not want to miss us discuss how to handle the pressure, a perspective shift, the difference between goals and desire, setting great goals, what it means when we say pressure is self-applied. Enjoy this episode, part 1 of 2 on the Winners Find a Way show. This is Trent Clark, CEO of Leadershipity, serial entrepreneur, international speaker, and longtime coach in professional baseball, where I coached in 3 World Series. Today, I am welcomed on the Winners Find a Way show with my special guest, Matt Mieske. Say hello, Matt.
Hi, Trent. Good to be here.
Oh, man, it's great to have you. Matt Mieske and I go back a long way, former professional ball player, and Matt has done all sorts of different things. Matt, you and I are Michigan kids, both born and raised, I think, and you're a Western Michigan Bronco, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so for those who are just joining the show first time, Winners Find a Way is the name of our show. It is all about winners that have overcome. For folks that know people who they find to be successful, people who have quote unquote conquered it all. You know, this is a guy who went to the major leagues. You find out that people have to overcome some challenges along the way, and it is never easy. And so if you're tuning in for the first time and you face stiff adversity, you feel like losses are mounting and you need to find a better way, I think you came to the right place. You're going to hear great stories and insights. So if you're already an entrepreneur, an athlete, an elite performer, business leader, or just looking to start your journey today to being elite, I think this is the perfect place for you to learn. So I'm excited about having Matt join us today. Matt, tell them real quickly, where can they find you online?
Well, being in the financial industry, we have a lot of rules. So I don't have a Twitter or Facebook, but I am on LinkedIn and I have a website, mattmieske.com. Twitter and Facebook, they just started allowing us to do that like last year.
Wow.
So I've chosen not to do that, but whether I do it in the future is kind of up in the air. A lot of your space
really stays in that LinkedIn space anyway. I mean, I'm not sure how much you're going to garner in the wealth management from Facebook or Twitter, but I certainly appreciate the fact that you are pretty locked in to talent and talking there where the business professionals are, which is commonly LinkedIn.
Correct. And I don't feel like I need to share my every thoughts regarding finances over Facebook or Twitter. If I was in baseball coaching or something, maybe I would use that more. But financial stuff is more private, so I think it tends to lend itself to not having more information out there versus less. So
great. I'll tell you, let's quickly talk a little bit about some highlights about you. Bronco Hall of Fame, by the way, in 2002. You were a former outfielder in the major leagues. 68, so you got a year on me, by the way. Maybe almost 2 on me, by the way. Brewers, Cubs, Mariners, Astros, Diamondbacks, all over an 8-year span, and you're in the major leagues. Drafted by the Padres in the 17th round, which is funny because you don't list the Padres as any of your major league experience, so there's a story there. Traded to the Brewers. And then over your 8 seasons, pretty awesome. Best season in 96 with the Brewers, 14 home runs, 278, 374 at bats. Pretty awesome. 3 all-time Mid-American Conference selection. I was also a Mid-America guy playing at the University of Toledo, a rival of the old Broncos. So I don't know if we ever played at the same time. I think you were already out by the time my years at Toledo. So you were probably already drafted. I'm not.
Yeah. maybe
So
one year was overlap, but I don't know if we didn't play every team, so we may not have played Toledo
yeah,
when I was
so
a
in
senior.
90, yeah, and so in 90, I think 91 was actually my first season for the Rockets. So
Okay,
I
so
think we
yeah,
didn't overlap. A career fielding percentage of 979. So, obviously well known for your defensive skills. And also what most people don't know about you is you had a near death experience at a pretty young age that changed some things probably for you as an adult. So we definitely want to get into that. So Matt, thanks for coming on. I'm excited to have you.
yeah, it's good to be here. I like speaking with people regarding this topic on leadership. I think it's an area that's sorely missed in our society today, and if anything that I've experienced can help someone else through a difficult time, then that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's why you come on a show like this, right? To take all these experiences you've had in your lifetime, which are many, and coming from a different background, probably. I mean, we know the major leagues are not filled with tons of Midwesterners, right? Like it is a lot of ball players that come out of California, come out of Florida, come out of the Sunshine States, Arizona, Texas, where it's easily played 10 months a year. We do not play baseball 10 months a year in Michigan. So just FYI for everybody else, like you better have another sport of choice, right?
We're happy to get 10 days, not 10 months.
10 good days,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's it. It's so true. So probably it takes that whole new impression. We should talk about this, is that impression of how many now kids are playing all these games. When you and I were young, we played all this practice. That's what we played because we knew, hey, you might only get, if you got in 40 games, that was tons back in the day.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Yeah. I can remember my first year at Toledo, we played in a field that had drainage issues, right? So I can remember my first year when we started, we'd start games in the South like in February or early March, and we'd be back up mid-March, which in the Midwest that could mean 65, it could mean 35, right? So
Right.
you don't know what you're going to get. And I would be standing in an inch of water in the outfield in the 30 degrees. So we would take the old ice bags that we'd use after the game and we'd bag our feet before we put 2 layers of socks on so you could keep your feet dry.
I have to admit, I never did that, but there were guys in Milwaukee that did that. They used bread bags, like
Bread
from a
bags.
loaf of
Yep. Bread
bread
bags worked.
in between layers of socks to keep your feet wet. But yeah, that's always a challenge early in the spring, trying to keep your feet dry. And once they get wet, it's miserable. But
it's miserable. You're cold. It's tough to ever heat up again, right? So
yeah,
it's tough when your feet get wet. And I started with the bread bags and realized that those bags they were using to ice us down were, twice the millimeter thick, right? So I was like, oh man, these are so much better. I could stay drier, but they were weighty,
Yeah, they were. But they work.
They worked. Yeah. So thanks for coming on the show. I'm super excited to talk a little shop. Let's get into you growing up a kid. You're a Midwestern kid. Did you grew up in the Midland area? And tell us a little bit about that real quick.
Yeah, cold weather place. Today, a lot of kids specialize in one sport. I played all the sports on a seasonal basis, so wasn't exclusive to just baseball. But I knew when I was pretty young, 5 or 6, that was my favorite. That was my passion. And watching the Tigers growing up, I just knew at a very early age that that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't know you're going to make it at that time, but that was my lifelong dream to get to that level. I didn't even know what it was called. I just saw it on television, and it was something that was interesting. Over time, you learn that it's called the major leagues, and okay, that's what I want to do. So yeah, from that point, I would still play basketball and football and hockey, but baseball was always my favorite.
Yeah, a lot of ice hockey in the Midwest. Did you play ice hockey?
Yeah,
I love
but
it.
we didn't have any ice arenas in our area, so we played everything outside. As soon as the ponds or the water around us would freeze, we would play. We had a neighbor who would flood his backyard and make a rink in his backyard.
Yeah,
and I would play against kids that were 5, 6, 7 years older, and I mean, learn the hard way. check you over the snowbank, and you'd disappear for about 20 minutes because you had to dig your way out. But yeah, it was fun. I love playing that. And actually, if we would have had arenas, that would have probably been my favorite sport to play. But we just didn't have access to ice. There wasn't teams. Now they have high school teams that play. But everything was either pickup type games or, not organized. You just play against whoever's out there. It could be adults. And but yeah, it was fun.
I love that. I love it, man. I tell you, pond hockey, there's something special about pond hockey because it's always with friends, right? There's fellowship there. There's a lot of things going on, and it kind of brings it to another level. But I would say the one thing about hockey that most people don't know is, like, people think football's a hard game. Like, hockey, you better be tough. You have much less padding. You are much more exposed. Oftentimes in football, both people know contact is coming. In hockey, one person often doesn't know contact is coming, and so, like, that's you're not always ready for the hits and prepared as you'd like to be. So let's pivot to your childhood. We had, I'll kind of go to, the baseball thing. One of the things that was influential for me as a kid was I was 14 when the Tigers won the World Series, the 1984 Tigers. They called them the Bless You Boys, right? So you would have been about 15, 16 years old, that they're a big influence in the Midwest, and especially in Michigan, obviously. But was there some moment, like, along that path that was like the impactful point where you were like, I have got skills for this. Like, I can do this. I can make this happen. Was there something that kind of led you to that? Winners Find a Way show is brought to you by Data-Driven Operations, powered by Journeys. Journeys is a software solution that helps you create a winning formula for your organization. DD Ops, powered by Journey, helps you act as one, see as one, work as one, play as one, win as one. Are you looking for visibility, coachability, and productivity amongst your team? DD Ops is your software. Click on the link in the show notes to learn more.
I would say just on all the teams that I played on, a lot of times I played against competition that was older than I was, and that always helped. Mm-hmm. Probably the point at which I realized that I really had a good opportunity was probably in Connie Mack. I was 16, playing against 17, 18-year-olds, and we were also part of a league where it was a men's league. So they had a lot of college players that would come back and play in the summer, and guys who had finished college or played professionally and then were done playing, but they still like to play in the summertime. And that kind of competition over the course of a summer, for 2 summers, playing about 50 games and being able to compete with them. Those guys had played, a lot of them, in mid-American schools, or some of them were Division I, either Michigan State or Michigan. And then some guys who had played in the minors, and being able to not only compete, but do well against them. Kind of the first time I was able to really see how I stacked up. Yes. And then I played in the Michigan high school all-star game in Detroit at the old Tiger Stadium, and got to see a lot of those guys who were same caliber. And then I played in the Olympic Festival after I graduated high school, before I started college. And there were players from all over the country, north, south, east, and west. I remember Mike Mieske and Paul Carey and guys like that. Mike Mieske is in the Hall of Fame. So other high school kids, the best in the country, and being able to go to that, or being nominated to go play in that, that's when I kind of knew that I was kind of in that pool of people. But what you do with it and where you go from there is really dependent on a lot of things.
I think about some of the primetime Michigan players when we were kids, and Schmaltz was a little bit ahead of me. He might have been a little closer to your age. Avery was right in my age. And then, Derek Jeter was right behind me a few years, right? So, three pretty high quality players that turned out to be pretty good major leaguers right at the time. And there were many more. But I think those three just kind of stuck out to me. And, where you got a chance to size yourself up against what everyone was saying, like, hey, if this isn't the best, this is pretty close, right?
Right.
And I think that's, you find that out. I had a similar experience that I played with a really high level travel team. And my last year at Connie Mack, I bypassed it to go play in the men's league because Battle Creek was the host of the national championship. I was being, recruited to play on the best team because the host of that league who won the league was the national championship host. It was an automatic bid, right, to the nationals. So a lot of college players, a lot of just former released pro players. And that's where I the same thing. I kind of cut my teeth to say, hey, can I compete against these players? And you doing that at 16 is amazing. And it's definitely validation. So I love that. So let's talk a little bit about a time that you've had to overcome, right? A time you were up against it, losing, found a way to come back and win, down, but not out. Tell me a little bit about that, Matt.
For me, it was when I was in AAA. I mean, obviously had a lot of success in everything I did up until then. I had really never failed, not to any great extent, not like striking out, but really felt like I was up against it. And so I had just gotten traded from San Diego to Milwaukee, had played A-ball the previous year.
Wow. So quick. So for people who don't know, let me explain this real quick, Matt, before you keep going. For people who do not know in business, if you don't understand, the major leagues is the end of 7 levels. There are 2 rookie ball or low A ball clubs. There is a full season low ball A club. There is a full season high level A, which are different leagues, often like the California League or the Carolina League. And then you hear the double A leagues, which is now really progressing one step away from the big leagues. I like to tell a lot of players, you're one step away at double A or higher and triple A, because if an injury happens, they will call a double A or triple A player to the major leagues from that position. So at triple A, you are literally the backup typically to the starter. If there's not a utility, they'll have a backup obviously in the league. That's usually a taxi person, a taxi squad. You can hold a lot of different positions, but the number 2 is often sitting in AAA to get the reps because you don't get enough at bats when you're a utility.
So I'd gotten traded in spring training 5 days before the end of spring training. Had played high A the year before.
Where are you in spring training with San Diego?
I was in Yuma, Arizona.
Yuma.
Yuma. Yeah, there's not a team there.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for Yuma.
Oh, yeah. But it was way away from everybody else.
Yeah.
And I got traded to Milwaukee, and they were in the Phoenix area.
Okay.
And Chandler. And
so it wasn't all the way to Florida, so that was good.
No, thankfully. But we only had a couple of days before spring training ended. And I went right to the big league camp for a few days. And then when the season started, I went to AAA. So I skipped AA. I never played AA.
Wow.
And so I was 23. And I got traded as part of the trade for Gary Sheffield. So it was a big trade. I think internally, I put a lot of pressure on myself to justify why, I don't know. But no one told me, hey, don't put pressure on yourself. This happens. But I'd always dreamed of playing in the majors, and baseball was always just kind of just what I love to do.
Yeah.
When I got traded, I realized, oh, this is a little different than what I thought. This is actually a business, and this stuff happens. You're an asset, and if we can move you somewhere, they do it.
Yep.
So you go through all that, emotional grappling with yourself, and why did this happen? And you have to look at it as a good thing, but initially you wonder, why did this happen? I'd won the most valuable player in the minors 2 years in a row previous to that. And then, you get traded. So that's what happens when you do really well. Well, I wasn't going to play right field in San Diego because Tony Gwynn was there. Mm-hmm. I knew after a while that was a good thing because it was going to help me move up the ladder quicker.
Yeah.
But I put a lot of pressure on myself. That in baseball, as you know, doesn't work. You have to play the game relaxed, and the more you press, the worse your results are. So probably midway through May-ish, 6 or 7 weeks into the season, I remember looking up at the big scoreboard in Mile High Stadium in Denver, and I was hitting 169, and it was embarrassing to me. It was, I
Probably lower than your weight at that time.
it was, and I'm used to seeing a 3 at the start of my batting average, and
Yes.
so I think it was just a time where I was pressing harder and harder and harder, and you're one step away, and you want to succeed so much and get there that the results were just diminishing, and I just was burying myself farther into kind of almost a depression. Really, it was failure. Failure for me really never happened in any sport or and academically, nothing. And now with the thing that's most important in your life that you pushed for since you were 5, you're failing. And I found myself questioning, do I really want to keep doing this? Is it worth it? All those thoughts that go through your head when you're struggling, as everybody does. And so for me, it was just a matter of being able to relax. That's really where faith started to come in. Then God used that in my life in a big way. And my season turned around. I probably had over 200 at bats at that point or close to it. And I ended up the season hitting 277. So I think from that point forward, I hit like 350 or 360 just to lift it to that point. So just a big difference. And I learned so much about myself and about baseball. And I was always able to look back on that experience, though, whenever I was struggling and lean on that to not get too discouraged. Not that you won't get discouraged, but not get to the point where you're depressed or despondent or just, at a complete loss and not able to, be able to do anything. And, but it was that experience for me that was very pivotal, and it could have went either way. And there's guys who run into that and they never make it out, and then they end up out of the game or whatever sport they're in. So thankfully I was allowed to get through that, and I've used it countless times in my life, and as I talk to other people, I think it's encouraging because I know what it is to be at rock bottom.
Tons of stuff to unpack there, right? like Gary Sheffield, first of all, like huge trade, like the Padres were pushing at that time for, another title, right? And they were kind of getting on their way. They were building that foundation for one that went to the World Series later. And then you mentioned Mile High Stadium, which of course at that time there were no Rockies. Denver was the AAA team. And so you played in Mile High, the old football, the Broncos field. And where the ball, you could pop one up to the second baseman that actually leaves the stadium because of that altitude there, no joke.
Yeah.
And then did you have this, and I tell you what you mentioned that was really important to me was pressure on myself. Like that doesn't serve very well in baseball. I don't know if that serves in any sport, right? Like when we get tensile and we contract and we constrict, like all of a sudden we're not free to flow if we're so uptight and so pressured. And what I like to tell people is pressure is self-applied. Like no one else can put pressure on you. Now, I'm sure if you honor the organization, you're listening to the general manager who's like saying, hey, Mieske, we made a big trade for you. Like we expect more. Of course, you honor, you respect them. You can feel that pressure. But some fan who goes, hey, Mieske, you're garbage. And you're like going, I don't accept that pressure because like, why would I let that in? Right.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
we have to allow it. We have to allow it for ourselves. And so we typically self-apply our pressure on the magnitude of what we decide for. Right. And of course, your desire to succeed, all this is allowing like, hey, I've got to keep going, Matt. You got to be better. You got to work harder. Today you're going to do it. This is it, and you can just imagine as that's not working.
Right.
This has always worked. I've always worked hard.
Always led to diminished returns. And I think that was something that you could remember as time went on and get yourself out of those spots. And I think for me, it was being able to really avoid prolonged periods of of slumps. I really, after that, I really only had one other time the rest of my career where I really felt like I was in a slump, and which in the majors it's going to happen because the other guys
Yeah.
are good too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. They're pretty good.
yeah, and but I was able to get through that, and but the stuff that I learned in the minors and going through that really helped me. And in any sport or any vocation in life, you have to be mentally tough. And there's competition in business, there's competition in sports, there's competition in life.
Yep.
And learning how to compete and show up is very important. And I think what you said, that self-applied pressure, another thing that helped me along the way, and I learned this when I was 25 or 26, but I use it all the time with my kids. But control the things that you can control, and the other stuff, don't worry about it.
Yep.
You control your attitude, how hard you concentrate, and the effort that you give. You're not in control of the results. As a hitter, you can hit a screaming line drive somewhere. Well, somebody out in the field has a glove and they get paid to catch that.
Yeah.
And get you out. You can't control where it goes after that. You did your job. So, and I think in the business world, there's so many things that we can't control, but you can't control when you show up, how hard you work, how much time you put into it, and whether you're able to concentrate or not, and the attitude that you have in good or bad times. And everything else, like you said, is self-applied pressure. And if you try to control the things that are outside of your scope, you could look at it like you failed, but you really didn't. That was one thing when I was playing in Milwaukee that used to bug the crap out of me. But people would at the beginning of the season say, "Well, do you have any goals for this year?" Well, the normal response, well, yeah, I want to have 30 home runs and drive in 100, hit 300. That's my goal. But what I realized was goals are different than desires. A goal many times takes the help or assistance of someone else. You can have a goal of doing that, but if you don't get your name put in the lineup and you don't get enough at bats, you're not going to reach your goal. Did that mean you failed? No. Right. So there was a coach that I had that encouraged me to start focusing on, again, things you control. I have a desire to do the best that I can. The outcome is also dependent on how often I get a chance to play.
That's right.
So what I learned was, if you set a goal, you could be setting yourself up for disappointment, because if you only get 200 at bats, there's no way you're going to drive in 100 runs.
That's right.
And so did that mean you had a bad year? Well, in whose eyes? You didn't fail. Yeah. You do the best with the opportunity that you're given. And it applies to anything that you do in life. And so that was, again, as hard as that was, my one thing that I don't have any regrets about how I played or how well I did. I wish I would have got to play more than I did, but I learned a lot through that. I learned a lot watching games, watching people, learning how to handle adversity, learning how to handle not getting what you want, and being patient, that kind of thing. And all those are life lessons that are huge, and I've used countless times in my job now. And I wish I would have played more, but it was still at the highest level, and it was what was supposed to happen, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I love that perspective shift in that, because I think a lot of people can really glean from that, right? Like, be careful how you set up your perspective and your goals. And we talk a lot about that with titles. I can remember one year I was in a rebuilding year in the major leagues, and one of the, chief business folks set a vision that we would be a playoff team. And I'm like going, what? I don't see that with We weren't a very good major league team. We lost a couple of veterans. Our AAA team finished last. We weren't sitting there with a bunch of prospects on the doorstep of greatness here yet. They still were developing, and they were coming along, but a little slower, or they were younger at that level still. So it was a real stretch goal and vision. And the problem was, you show up at All-Star break and you're 25 games out of 500. And you're like, I don't think this vision's going to ever happen, right? And so now if it doesn't happen and you can't, and no one can identify with that, the paradigm shifts. Everybody starts thinking, hey, it's all about me. What do I got to do? Because the team, we're not, that goal is not even, reachable. And so I think it gets really challenging. And again, it could be some of the things that were out of his control when he kind of set that in place, a trade, someone gets injured and he's thinking, oh, we're going to ride this player higher. And it's, so there's a lot of factors. So I think that's a really good reset for a paradigm of how people set their desires and goals and what they're going for, because we know that goals and things that we're doing really come down to the moment, day by day. That's how they're set, is what you do today to get you. I always like to say, this day for that day, right? And I learned that from Coach Manny over at Michigan State. But this day for that day, like, what am I doing this day? Even though that day may be 2 years away, this day I gotta train, I gotta get ready, I gotta work, I gotta do it. And I think there's also some interesting perspectives that Milwaukee makes this trade for you, obviously giving up a high price player in Gary Sheffield, but my assumption is I'm assuming that, they've got eyes on you because you're a Midwest kid. They've seen you play college ball. They've also seen you compete at national level, coming out of that space and being resilient to that, where you and I both know a lot of players that come from small towns or the North. And then we get on that big stage. It's a bit intimidating when you play against players that have been playing on TV in college half the year, and they're well known in the papers or nationally. And then, hey, nobody knows who I am because I play at a smaller school, or I'm from another area, or in baseball, how many high school kids sign, and then you're playing against the top college players saying, hey, how do I compete? They're 3 years older, they're more mature, they're bigger, they've got more experience. And the mind starts getting into your own intimidation. Talk a little bit of that. Thank you for joining us for another Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. If you love this episode, share this episode with your friends and follow us on whatever podcasting medium you're listening to. If you want more content from us, join us at leadershipity.com or the Leadershipity YouTube channel. You can find us on all the social media networks at either Trent M. Clark or Leadershipity. For our award-winning workshop, Win with Great Teams, you can find that page on LinkedIn, as well as our corporate page, Leadershipity. If you want to win more, it starts with you today. Say it with me now. I have what it takes.